presentation on contact valence prevalence. Thank you, Tim.
Good morning. My name is Tim Lang, and I work in Stefania Paolini's lab at the University of Newcastle. And this project was performed as part of the Newcastle-Oxford Centre for Conflict and Cohesion. A hope for the current project is to assist the movement from micro or individual level understanding toward a study of intergroup phenomena which crosses the scales of inquiry between micro, meso or community level and macro or national levels. Initially, we identified that the inclusion of negative contact measures in the intergroup literature provided an opportunity to advance these ends. The inclusion of this data has allowed for the study of valence asymmetries. Valence asymmetries refer to the differential qualities of positive and negative contact. Somewhat depressingly, it appears that negative contact typically increases prejudice more than positive contact reduces it, an asymmetry in impact. One factor that may hold society in better stead is that positive contact has appeared to be more frequent than negative, and asymmetry in prevalence. Asymmetry in prevalence was of particular interest to us as it appeared likely to be highly context sensitive yet still predictive of intergroup outcomes. By using the relative frequency of positive versus negative contact as our effect size in a meta-analysis, we were able to provide novel insights as well as demonstrate the promise of a methodology which crosses the scales of inquiry. However, given this is a new avenue of research, we first identified an integrative theoretical framework, information ecology. Information ecology focuses on the nature of information in the environment rather than the cognitive and motivational biases held by individuals. The three main principles through which ecology is held to affect behaviour are 1, the distribution of stimulus information, 2, sampling constraints, and 3, the topology of relations. Hypotheses were generated by applying these principles as exemplified by research to date. While there are many micro-scale findings that this framework accounts for, it is as yet untested for larger scale social phenomena, something we aim to rectify. So using meta-analysis, we aim to test for a valence asymmetry and prevalence and test the moderation of this effect by contact type. Denrell showed that individuals typically pursue positive contact experiences and avoid repeating negative ones. Under information ecology, this constitutes a sampling bias, and based on this, we hypothesized that positive contact would be more frequent, both overall and for direct face-to-face contact. When contact experiences occur as second-hand accounts, the outgroup exists only as a socially constructed version of themselves. The perception of outgroup stereotypes as shared knowledge amongst in-group members makes them more likely to be communicated thanks to the communication maxim of quality. In-group individuals, assuming such shared knowledge, can do so because of a shared position in the topology of intergroup relations. For this reason, we predicted that positive contact would be relatively less frequent than for direct contact or overall contact. We also tested for moderation by macro-level factors. This was done by adaptation of cross-national comparative methodology, which is common in sociology and political science. To perform our cross-national comparison, we identified the nations data was collected in and the dates closest to data collection. For the analysis, we took our effect size and also went to data that have been collected by projects in other disciplines at this national level. For example, Gnome and colleagues 2016 report figures on the concentration of media markets around the world, which were generated by a large international project in media studies. As there's very limited time, I'll here illustrate and report only on media market concentration. But if you're interested in other results, please reach out at some point during the rest of the conference and I'll be happy to communicate those via email. Media market concentration refers to the size of individual firms in relation to the industry. For example, Australia experiences a highly concentrated media market, with Rupert Murdoch's News Limited controlling 63% of newspaper revenue and other sectors experiencing similar conditions. Concentration is measured by the Herfindahl-Hirschman index, with higher values indicating higher concentration. Fewer owners in a market means less diversity in viewpoints and less room for minority representation. So, through an information ecology lens, this would affect the distribution of information, limiting opportunities of stereotype disconfirming messages. Hence, we predicted that higher media market concentration would be associated with lower relative frequency of positive contact. So, bit of methods. We identified 28 eligible samples from 1,319 records located in PsycInfo and this was for a total sample size of around 7,500. To enter, a paper must have been able to establish a relative frequency of valence contact within individuals. We had to be able to compare measures between studies, and importantly, the data had to represent participants' day-to-day intergroup experiences, so things that were the result of, say, exposure to some experimental manipulation weren't eligible. So overall, we detected a significant positive asymmetry in prevalence, and this was characterized by significant heterogeneity in effects, as can be visibly seen in this forest plot. Such large heterogeneity suggested that our measure was indeed context sensitive. In line with expectations, positive contact made up relatively less total contact for indirect than direct contact experiences. And although positive contact was, however, still more frequent than negative contact overall. Finally, more highly concentrated media markets were associated with less positive contact. So we found a very large effect for positive asymmetry in prevalence, which appears to be highly influenced by contextual factors, both proximal and distal. Our results bear out predictions made from the information ecology framework, and we believe that we've identified use for cross-national analyses in intergroup research. Some limitations. We had a limited number of effect sizes, so the inclusion of negative contact, as I'm sure you're all aware, is a relatively recent thing in intergroup research. Other databases need to be searched, and unpublished work wasn't collected, so we make no assessment of publication bias. However, we're working to address these limitations currently. For future research, I think we'd advocate for a broader application of the information ecology approach in primary intergroup research, and more comparative analyses in intergroup contact. And I think that Linda highlighted last night the value of being interdisciplinary and talking to lots of different people. And I think that this framework provides a good opportunity to, I guess, speak a methodological language that political scientists, sociologists, and psychologists can all understand. Thanks. Sorry, that's a little Ozpol joke there for those of you coming from overseas.
Great job, Tim. I think the media market concentration is a really interesting sort of structural measure that we typically don't use so much in social psychology. I think that would be fantastic to try and maybe follow the model of yesterday's fantastic presentation by Tabia, am I saying that name right? Of, multiple sites, multiple samples, where you go out and you sample from across these global nations that instantiate the different kind of markets that you have. Because I think what you would predict is that where that media concentration was worst, you would get worse news media bias in reporting on minority groups. So you'd have a real strong prevalence effect there in the kind of contact that people are getting indirectly through their news stories.
Yeah, so I think that can't also downplay the possibility that there's something. I mean, the R squared was like 0.178, which seems like a lot of variance to be explained by one factor when it's something that would have so much noise in it. So it's possible that media market concentration actually acts as like just an indicator for how rampant capitalism is in a particular country, or how much a free market system has been allowed to run away, and that there would be all sorts of other damages to social fabric associated with that. So I think that also could play an influence in that, and that maybe it's not necessarily just to do with the structural that particular structural aspect as well.